What's up, everyone? Welcome to the episode of Moving with Life. This is episode 131. Thanks for joining. I hope you all have had a good and restful weekend, fun weekend, eventful weekend, whatever it may be. Hopefully you all have had a safe weekend nonetheless, and ready to tackle this week, whatever that may entail for you. Today, we're gonna listen to a little excerpt of deGrasse Tyson. It seems like he's giving some type of keynote at a college. I just found it and I listened to it once, and I was like, and the title of the video for the page that posted this, it's titled, "Do You Have Symptoms of a Smart Person?" I kind of don't like that title, and I'll go into more of it. I'll go into more of why I don't after we listen to it. But it's only just under 5 minutes long. So we're going to listen to it, and then we will talk about it for a second. Then we'll be out here and get you on your way to the rest of your day.
I just want to highlight a few things. I'm worried really about how much fuzzy thinking is going on in the world. Fuzzy thinking, people just not thinking straight. And I try to think hard about what was behind it. And I reflect on a time with my sister. My sister is younger than I am, 4 years older. One time, I said, "So, Lynn, where do you want to go have lunch today?" Because I had some cash, and And she said, "Well, what are my choices?" And it was odd because I didn't realize until that moment that she was not yet capable of simply coming up with a fresh idea. Why? Because she'd spent her whole life taking multiple choice tests. So I ask a question, she wants choices in front of her to pick from. This would continue the whole life. And then I tested this with other people. People want choices. And I realized maybe it's hard to just think originally and come up with a fresh thought that the person who's offering the question hadn't thought up yet. Because I think somehow in our society we're hell-bent on the answer. The right answer. Consider this following example. Imagine you have a spelling bee. This is contrived, but it makes the point. There's a spelling bee, and you have to spell the word cat. Okay. So one student spells it C-A-T. Person got it right. The next person spells it K-A-T. That's wrong. You got that wrong. Okay. Third person spells it X-Q-W. You realize that is marked equally as wrong with the K-A-T? And so we've built a system for ourselves where there's an answer and everything else is not the answer, even when some answers are better than others. So our brains are absent the wiring capable of coming up with an original thought. In another example, a little contrived, but it brings the point home even a little more strongly. If you're an employer and two candidates come up looking for a job, and this is again a contrived example, and you're interviewing the two candidates, and you say, as for part of this interview, I just want to ask you, what's the height of the spire on this building that we're in? And the candidate says, "Oh, I was an architect. I've majored in architecture for a while, and I memorized the heights of all the buildings on campus. I know the height of that spire is 150 feet. In fact, 155 feet tall." Okay, turns out that's the right answer. That's the right answer. And the person came up with it in seconds. That person goes away. The next candidate walks in. "Do you know the height of the spire on this building?" The candidate says, "No, but I'll be right back." The person runs outside, measures the length of the shadow of that spire on the ground, measures the length of her own shadow, ratios the height to the shadows, comes up with a number. Runs back inside, it's about 150 feet. Who are you going to hire? I'm hiring the person who figured it out, even though it took that person longer, even though the person's answer is not as precise. I'm hiring that person because that person knows how to use the mind in a way not previously engaged. You realize when you know how to think, it empowers you far beyond those who know only what to think.
Not only how to think, but, or what do you say? Not only how to think, but what, not only what to think, but how to think. And I feel like that video, again, I just found it and I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm going to talk about for today's episode. And starting from the beginning of the video, we're talking about his sister and how they're 4 years apart, and his sister wanted options, and then that's how I was raised. I think right now in Texas, students are starting to go through their statewide standardized exam to see if they are basically tells you if you have been learning, if your teachers have been teaching you, and if you have the ability to move on to the next grade. And I actually wrote a paper in college. I need to find it. It's probably in my external hard drive, back home. But because I wrote a paper on standardized testing, and I've been very opposed to it just because of the outcomes that it concludes statistically. Even though as we're learning ourselves via internet and via all these people that have been successful and are successful and are becoming successful. There's so many different routes. There's so many different routes to become successful, right? And this video is not even about the success, but it's about thinking. And I know that's I didn't realize it, and maybe I haven't been able to put it into words yet. But as time has gone on, I've mentioned, I do a lot of deep thinking. I read, and then from the reading, it starts. My ideas start shooting, my brain starts firing on all cylinders, and I'm like, what does this mean? What is going on? Where are we going? What's going, where have I been? Where am I going? So many things that for me just, again, fires my brain on all cylinders, like, okay, cool. And then I start, going to that thought. But, it seems as I've watched this video and, trying to put some of these pieces together in my head is that, that I think that is one thing that I'd like to not make it a central premise or say this is what this podcast is about, but I hope in the very least that in these one-sided for now conversations, plus the conversations I do have in person with coworkers or family and friends and different people in general when I meet them, that there is some type of want to think. Maybe not. I'm not looking to be an inspiration. Yeah, I don't even like using that phrase. But if we can go through this episode, go through these excerpts, things that I've said in the past, 42 rules, Carl Sagan, Robert Kiyosaki. I was actually thinking about doing a Robert Kiyosaki excerpt again, but I'm like, I found this one, so let me run with this one. Something Warren Buffett, but my point, I guess, of this whole little bit is the fact of like, how about we think a little more? And the dichotomy, and that's another thing I was trying to think of as I was watching this. Like, okay, what's the dichotomy of being able to think outside the box? And being able to think outside the box is also being able to follow rules when there's certain rules. I've been in instances over the past 10 years where I didn't know how to put words to it until later on. It wasn't like more recent than not, but I know it was like maybe the end of college, and I don't even know who I heard it from originally, but sometimes there's too many chiefs and not enough Indians. And there was something that happened recently where I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly what's going on here. Too many people wanting to say, I know the best way to do this thing over your way, versus how about we just, I mean, and sometimes you don't have time. Sometimes, I mean, then there's hierarchy, and there's certain things that come up where it's like, okay, hey, how about you just shut the hell up and just listen for a little bit, you know? Because sometimes that's the answer. Just be quiet and just listen, right? And from what I've seen from people that I've met, and myself included, I'm very much included into this thought and statement. But we're like, oh, but I know the answer. But I know the and it's good to be eager about knowing the answer. It's good to know the answer, right? But then, you know, if you heard the last bit of, you know, this architecture example, where Neil deGrasse Tyson would rather hire the person who's a little bit off but figured out how to solve the problem. In this case, it's a literal math equation, but versus the guy who went through college, which is good. And that's another dichotomy. Is like when you go to college and you learn things. In my case, it was business, a little bit of calculus, a little bit of, you know, a little bit more in-depth math, business principles that people have created, and some that have stood the test of time. That's good because if he was able to memorize and know, I know the buildings because I was in architecture. It's like, well, that's pretty cool. That's something I can do. But then when you think about this other person who went outside and used the shadow of the sun with the building, and he was able to get the math problem to figure out the problem. That is the balance of why it's okay to find the answer, multiple ways to find the same answer. I mean, and at the end of the day, in this case, it's a math problem. So you want to be, you know, if you miss up too much, then yeah, you're going to be too far off, and that could, you know, lead to the integrity loss of the, you know, the building. And we can go into like a deeper thing of that. But the point is that if we can just say a little bit above the ceiling here, it's like, think. We have the ability to think, and college, I know that it did it for me, but again, I said this over and over again, it's like, but college also was a piece of it. Going to school was a piece of it, but the living on your own, learning how to do things and figure things out, learning how to cook and not burn the house, you know, not burn the house down, learning how to do just things, learning how to do things. I didn't think about it the way I think about it now, but it's like, well, yeah, it is problem solving. I did have to learn how to think for myself, because like, oh, well, let's just say I have this amount of money. And even then, like, you know, there's several cases where I was terrible with money, and when I was in college, but that's kind of the thing to do when you're 20, 21 years old, you know, 19, 20, 21 years old, living on your own. But then, you know, you hit a certain point where it's like, oh, I don't want to do that anymore. So in the example I can give is like learning how to live on $1. Like, I think I got down to, in total, if it was based off like the groceries I was buying for like the week or whatever, or it wasn't groceries for the month. I never bought that much, but let's say groceries for the next week or two. I think I got down to like, it was 168 or 176. It was around there. It was under $2. And that's what I was living off a day. You know, my meals were based on X amount of groceries. That's how much I spent. If I divided by 14, this is what I was spending a day. And I didn't even meal prep. I meal prepped a little bit, but it wasn't like what I do now. Now it's a little bit different. Now it's a little more concise. It's a little more precise as well. Where, you know, I have, because of other things that I want to do, investing and whatnot. I have bigger goals than my actual intake. As long as I have my intake and it's healthy and it's driving me in the right direction, that's all that really matters. And obviously every once in a while you can go outside that box, but the premise, again, to retract into this situation that we're talking about as far as the video and talking about thinking today, and this podcast, and then when you go out and meet someone new, or meet someone who has a different idea and you don't agree with it, but you don't have to agree with every single idea, but what if we just found the best problem and put our egos, because then you can bring in ego, you can bring in, you know, arrogance, and mine is the actual right answer and mine's the better answer. It's like, okay, and maybe it is, but maybe if we just put our ego aside and we just have a conversation about what the heck's going on, you know, you might have some type of agreement and kind of middle ground to like agree on, and then you go in it. Because again, the problem is the mission, right? The mission is the problem. That's what you're trying to solve. And when you put your ego aside, then you start having these conflicts and confrontations between people. And it's like, well, now we're getting away from the problem, right? And I think I always go to that because that's what I see. It's always, for the most part, it's always been a people problem, never a mission or a problem. It's never been an issue that's it's never been, the issue's never been the actual problem. It's like you have an issue, you have a fire to put out, but then you have all these not contradicting, but just conflicting personalities. But then the personality is what's keeping you from accomplishing the mission or putting the fire out. Whereas if you are able to listen, and this goes for both parties, whatever. I mean, I'm being very vague because there's no particular example. Speaking of, side note, contrived. So I didn't know what that word was. So here's an example of like, oh, contrived. I hear him. He used it twice. deGrasse Tyson used it twice. I'm like, what does that mean? And so I looked it up, and contrived means deliberately created rather than arising naturally or spontaneously. And I've tried to do that, and I do it very poorly. I'm not the best at trying to create the best example without having some type of experience in it. But I try, and sometimes I feel like I have contrived examples in previous podcasts. And I'll probably use that word a little more often, just like kind of like the way I use dichotomy. I'm going to put this one in my pocket and save it for like, hey, this is a contrived answer or contrived example, but this is what I was able to create off the top of my head right now. Yeah, deliberately created. It says, I guess the example says, the ending of the novel is too pat and contrived. That's the example that was given. This was via the dictionary of Google. But I guess I just want to drive home just the point of the video is to think. The point of the video is, so it's if you're alone and you have a problem, even if you don't have a problem, sometimes you have some alone time, and you actually get tired of your phone, so you put your phone down. It's like, man, I don't know what to do. Like you're on the borderline of bored, and it's like, I don't know what to do. I'm just kind of here, I'm kind of existing, and I realized that I've been doing that, for the past few weeks, especially. Well, I guess it'll be a few weeks now, but not too long. It's just with my schedule changing, and I personally I feel like using the early part of my day to get my my deep work done, which includes doing the material for this podcast. I liked the flow because I get up, I listen to a audiobook or a podcast, an educational podcast or something, maybe read, and that would kind of get my brain just kind of rolling so that I can record a podcast, go to the gym, have lunch, and then like the afternoon is kind of like open game. It's free game for me to choose what I want to do. If I want to do another podcast, or catch up on podcasts that I like listen to, dive deeper into the book that I'm reading, whatever it may be. So there's so many routes you can go, but the point again to keep driving it is allowing that free time to think, and some I would argue, or not I mean argue, some would argue, especially those that I listen to, Tim Ferriss and a lot of high performers that I know, is like meditation. Meditation is probably a big one, and you can use that to think. I used to do it more often. I used to be a lot more consistent. Now I find myself falling asleep. So I get back to it, but then also right at the moment, I'm not forcing myself to do a lot of things that I don't want to do. I'm really deep into the investing game. I call it an investing game because that's how I treat it, and that's how I go about it. Yes, it's money. Yes, it's real life. Yes, it's it's XYZ, ABCDE. Right? But still, like I don't take it seriously in the sense of like how can I phrase this? Going to contrived answer. It's a game because it's not life ending for me. There's a lot of other things that are more important to me in my life, the people in my life, the people I've met, the people I work with, my family back home, my friends back home, The friends I've made now that are all, right at the moment, they're all over the world, different parts of the world. Those are more important things. The communication, the open communication with those people is more important than the game I do when I'm here, looking at stocks and writing numbers down and trying to see what are the changes for the week, what are the changes for the day, what are the changes for the hour. And so me being able to treat it like that, it keeps, it doesn't give me a peace of mind. It keeps a peace of mind. Like, okay, cool. Cause I can put that down and it's going to keep, cause the machine keeps going. And now if we think about cryptocurrency and like these new things that are coming up, they're gaining some steam, getting really popular. But still, for me, it's still in the same ballpark. It's still a game. It's going to keep rolling, whether I'm here or not, whether I'm around or not, doesn't matter. Vice, when I go home, when I hang out with friends, when I meet new people and we have a conversation, a good, a cool conversation. Hey, yeah, we have a lot in common. Cool. Whatever it may be, those things, over time, they just become more important. And thinking for yourself, thinking for your team, it's something that should be. It's something that should be. I'm gonna say it's something that should be brought back because a lot of people are doing it, right? All these innovators, all these companies that are in, you see companies in the stock market, Chevron, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Tesla, Johnson & Johnson, McDonald's, Domino's, whoever. I was trying to label multiple businesses in different sectors. It's like people are doing it. I would just like to promote. So even if you're not looking to, change the world, but if you can enhance your world, and there's another video that I saw briefly. I didn't see the rest of it. Like, it's not. It was too long, and it was like, it deterred from what I was thinking about for this episode. But it was still another deGrasse Tyson video. But it's like, sometimes we don't. At least I know this is true for me, and this is me being honest on here. Is like, are our ideas worthy of creating meaning, or turning into meaning, something that's meaningful that will make the world better. Because sometimes we can think, but I'm just one person. Well, so are all these other creators, right? They just had the vision and I'll say the wherewithal. I don't want to use that word, but I'll use it, or that phrase, to just persist and persevere through whatever hills and valleys that were in the way to then execute and create whatever computers, home computers, technology, microphones, all this stuff, right? Because whenever I do have a conversation when I finally sit back and I just start we catch this flow, and I just listen to this person talking. It's like, oh, cool. Like, and I think, and I try not to go too deep all the time, but even though it's like it's my default. But it sometimes makes me think like, I wonder if they know that they have something meaningful to say or meaningful to do in this. I didn't want to say in this life, but it's like, I wonder, sometimes that's what I think when we're having a conversation. It's like, you're talented. You have something to say. And I'm not saying, because sometimes I think we think, or we want to have something to say, and we want millions to listen to us. And sometimes that's not the answer. Sometimes it's like, just this conversation. It's like, oh, you have something meaningful that, I'm glad we're having this conversation. I learned something from this conversation, and I'm going to try to take it with me and, use it myself, and vice versa. Yeah. Having deeper thinking. And I actually, I wrote this little phrase here as the video was starting, because it talks about, his sister having choices and whatnot. I've already said it, but the basically what I got out of it is it's like, oh, what options do we have to go eat? And I'm gonna argue, and you can agree or disagree with me. But sometimes we want options because we're scared of being wrong, and it's okay to be scared, but we should still execute. Anyways, I mean, again, it's taking let's say food for example. Oh, where do you want to go eat? It's like, well, wherever you want to go. Well, where do you want to go? Wherever you want to go. And then you have this freaking feedback loop. I'm like, well, I'm gonna throw. And then like I remember because I started doing this even a few years ago, where it was like, hey, I'm gonna choose something, and I don't want to hear no bitching about it because it was like, you all don't want to choose. I'm going to give you an option. Then if you don't want that option, then what the hell are we doing? Why are you going around these circles? I just put some options out there. But I would say exactly what I just said. It's like, hey, I'm going to give an option. And if I hear anything about it, then, decide then. I'm a very habitual eater. Whether it's making stuff here at home or going out to eat, I'm very habitual. So that's just me. So sometimes, especially when I'm with my cousin, when I'm back home, it's like, don't tell me you want Chinese, or don't tell me you want whatever maybe. And I'm like, well, choose something then. If you don't want that, then I'm a very open eater too. I like food, so it's like I'm down to try food or eat something that you want to eat. Because I'm just as open ended for food, and it's funny that I'm using food as an example. But the point is, when we go in this circle, because we might think that, oh, whatever I have to say, they're not going to want to do it anyways. Or I mean, it's a little harsher, but it's like, oh, whatever I'm thinking, no one wants to do it anyway. Oh, my answer's not worthy of being put out into the conversation. When in reality, it's like, it's probably the opposite. And also we can go into the fact of like there's so many food options, there's so many options for everything, because now you have options for what you want to. You have Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime. You have all that. You have a plethora amount of food options. Plethora. If you like going out to a bar and having some drinks with some friends, you have plethora, a massive amount of options of drinks you can have too. The point is to think, and we're gonna wrap up now for today. And I encourage you just to do, and what you can take this however you'd like, but the point is to think. The point is to think for yourself, and it doesn't have to be like. I guess just don't sell yourself short of what you'd like, what you want, and this goes beyond materialistic things. Do you actually think about what peace of mind means for you? If you happen to be married or have a significant other, what does peace of mind mean for you all as a whole? And then what is their peace of mind? And then what's your peace of mind? Like thinking about, I guess those are some examples that I can give of what makes me think, versus just existing in life, going back to what I was talking about in the beginning. But we'll conclude here. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. Hopefully you've got something out of it. If you want to communicate, we have the Instagram, we have email. If you want some merch, support, everything's in the show notes. I've been blogging, not consistently as far as like daily, but I've been trying to post thoughts as they've risen. I've tried to post thoughts and go about it that way. Take care of yourself mentally and physically. Take care of each other. Lead if you have a team. Lead from the front. Lead by example. Even when no one's looking. Hopefully we can come back just a little bit better next time. So until then, we'll see you all very, very soon.